Hello, everyone, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and this is a very exciting episode today. I am diving back in to The Last of Us, the television series that premiered on HBO and HBO Max. At least it was at the time. Now it's just Max, but it premiered in January of 2023 and it lasted all the way to March of 2023. 9 episodes, and this show was so good. It exceeded all expectations that I had. I did not expect this show to come off as well as it did. I am a big fan of the game. Love the Last of Us video game. I own it. Actually, I own 2 copies of it, plus the part 2. But as far as the original, I got the original game, and then I had to get the remastered version because I bought a PlayStation 5, and it didn't convert over to the 5, so I had to buy it again. And I end up no. Actually, I had it 3 times, but I lost one, and because I had did some remodeling in the house, and I lost all of my games. Well, not all of them, but most of them, and this was one of them. So I had to purchase it again. Then when I bought a PlayStation 5, I had to buy it again, the remastered version. But I didn't fret. I'm still not tripping on that. Loved it. It was worth every penny. I absolutely love this game. And the reason I love the game is because of the cinematic element of it. Games like Uncharted and so on and so forth, which Uncharted is also under the Naughty Dog development. But I just love the cinematic elements of those games, and that's why I'm drawn to them as much as I am. So while I was playing that game, the first time I played it and finished it, it took me forever to do it because it was pretty tough. It was a hard game, plus downright scary. Couldn't play it at night. And it's weird because I'm not scary like that. I'm not the type of person to go to a horror film and I'm ducking under seats and putting my hands over my eyes, and I go home after watching a horror movie, and I can't sleep at night because I'm worried what's under the bed, what's in the closet, or whatever. That's not me. Never have been me. But for some strange reason, this game did that to me, and it's not a real horror game in this traditional sense. It's more of just a post-apocalyptic drama, and the show is just like that as well. But that game spooked me out. That game really spooked me out. Resident Evil a few years back, when I played that game, never was into those games like talking about it, but when I did play them, I guess you could say they kind of creeped me out, but it didn't scare me like this. But the game scared me. And to get back to my original point, what got me in that game was how cinematic it was, and all I can think about was, man, some studio needs to get the rights to this game and make this into a movie. I never thought of a series. I always feel, okay, a movie. This would be so beautiful on the big screen. And for a while they were talking about that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Sam Raimi was in talks to kind of develop Last of Us movie. And of course that broke apart and whatever. And he ended up doing a television show, which I wasn't mad at because I just wanted to see it in a different media. So we get to the pre-production when they actually get the ball rolling. I guess it got green lit and they started announcing the cast. And I always envisioned Joel when I played the game. I always envisioned George Clooney in that role. It just seemed like a George Clooney type of role. Or my second choice was Josh Brolin. I always pictured those two as Joel if they ever did a live action adaptation. Well, that didn't happen. I don't know if HBO didn't want to pony up the money or whatever the case may be. Luck be it, they got probably the best person for the job, and that was Pedro Pascal. And when that was announced, I was like, ah, and I like Pedro Pascal. I borderline love him. You know, Pedro Pascal is amazing in everything he's in. Everything he's in. Even Wonder Woman 84, which was just a dumpster fire of a movie. Nothing redeemable about it. But for some strange reason, I enjoyed Pedro Pascal in that film. Regardless, they cast him. I'm like, okay, we'll see. You know, I couldn't see it, but I was willing to give it a shot. And then when it came down to the role of Ellie, now this was a tough nail or a tough nut to crack, as they say. I always, and I don't mean disrespect by saying this, I always envisioned Ellie, Ellen Page, at least she was at the time. Now Elliot Page, that's not going to happen. And if you see the character on the game, it looked like Elliot Page years ago. So I was like, okay, that's perfect. But of course, even if we didn't get the transition, it got kind of old for that role. So it didn't really match. But that would have been perfect had they made this film, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. Or TV show, I should say. But they kind of settled on, not really settled, but they went with Bella Ramsey. Now, the only thing I've seen Bella Ramsey in up to that point was Game of Thrones. She was good in Game of Thrones. She didn't have a big role. You know, she was a little kid. So, I don't know. I'm not feeling it because I only saw her in that role, that one little role, and she didn't look like Ellie. And for some strange reason, I was stuck on that. I was really stuck on that, and I feel like a fool for feeling that way. Same thing with Pedro Pascal. He didn't look like Joel. And Bella Ramsey didn't look like Ellie. And of course, Bella Ramsey, she's British, I believe. And like, I don't think that's gonna work. Well, as we go through these episodes and go through the show, it was quickly, I mean instantly, first episode, all that went away. That was gone within the first few moments of this show, or the first few moments when they popped up on screen. I was like, well, that's over. That little concern that I had was over. That was perfect casting, I humbly believe. The first season of this American post-apocalyptic drama, like I said, dropped on HBO January of 2023. Lasted for 9 episodes. It's based on the video game franchise developed by Naughty Dog. The series is set 20 years into a pandemic caused by a mass fungal infection, which causes its host to transform into zombie-like creatures, and it collapses the society as we know it. And in case you were wondering why we're going over the first season of The Last of Us right now, well, it's pretty simple. Because we're on the doorstep of season 2 to this amazing show. Season 2 of The Last of Us will drop on HBO and Max April the 13th. And that show, that season, will be based on part 2, the video game. We went through part 1 in the first season, which kind of shocked me. That we went through the entire game in one season. I was like, well, because at that point I didn't finish part 2, the video game. And to be clear and be honest, I still haven't finished part 2. I haven't went back and finished that part of that game. It's long. That game is very long, and is a lot to it. It's not as good as the first one, at least the first half of that game. And I think I'm halfway through. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's neither here nor there. I'm excited for season 2. I've finished enough of that game to know what is going to happen. I'm already spoiled. I know what happens in the game, the parts that I didn't get to yet. So that's part of the reason why I haven't jumped back on it and played uh, The Last of Us Part 2. But, anyways, I'm excited to see how it plays out on Max and HBO next week. This is going to be a very, I hope people are ready. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not spoiling nothing. I'm not going to insinuate anything. Just know this: if you never played the games and you're a big fan of the show, you enjoyed season 1, buckle up for season 2. Season 2 is going to tear your heart out. That's all I'm going to say, and I'm going to leave it at that. Anywho's, let's do a refresher. Let's do a recap of season 1 as we prepare to jump into season 2 next week, at least the time of this recording. Man, I cannot wait. I cannot wait for this show. Jumping into this season, beginning with episode 1 of season 1 of The Last of Us, which was entitled When You're Lost in the Darkness. This episode was directed by Craig Mazin, and he's one of the creators, along with Neil Druckmann, who created the game and came on to write and produce this show. Craig Mazin, who's not a stranger of successful, well-received, well-acclaimed TV shows on HBO. He before this, he did Chernobyl, which was awesome. In case you haven't watched that, that's a really good show. He jumped on board for this, and he directed the first episode, which introduced us to this world, gets us ready for this just crazy journey that we're about to get on. And I must say, this was kind of weird, this first episode, because in my mind, I was fully expecting a beat by beat adaptation of the video game. And so when this show started off, or this episode started off, and we kind of got a quote unquote origin of everything leading up to what we know, we being fans of the video games who played the video game, know where the game started, was kind of like, okay, so we're going in a different direction. But no, not really. Because you have to remember, at this time, we're just coming off of our own pandemic. We're just coming out of it, of COVID. And so we're getting this show about another pandemic, a global pandemic, and it correlates with what's going on in the real world. And so it's like, man, this is really hitting home, this stuff that they're talking about and doing on this show. And I never put 2 and 2 together, but the one scene really just sets up this massive fungal infection and how this what is it, cordyceps mutated and sparked this global pandemic, and the world literally collapsed. And so we pick up in this episode where we get a little more backstory with Joel and his daughter Sarah. Now in the game, it just picks up that night before everything went to hell. It was right then, and you have Sarah, she's looking for Joel, and Joel comes home, and you have these I guess zombies or whatever you want to call them, walking, attacking and whatnot. And so it was cool in the game the way they did it. The show did it the exact same way when all hell broke loose, even shot by shot kind of remake of the game. You know, when they're in the car, is the same camera angles and things of that nature, even same pieces of dialogue throughout the episode. So I knew this was going to be an amazing show from this moment on, because it felt like the game, but at the same time, it felt like they were making it their own, which is the weirdest thing. And it that's hard to do. It's very hard to do, but they pulled it off perfectly. And it does not disrespect the source material at all, because all of the source material is in here, every bit of it. So much so that actors or voice actors that provided the voices to these characters in the game appeared in this show. And in some cases, they were the characters that they were on the video game, just as Tess was, the actress who portrayed Tess in this show. She also did the voice of Tess in the video game. And it just added a level of realism to it. It just felt right. And from the moment we pick up with Joel, now the little extra parts that they had was Sarah going to the repair place with the watch, Joel's watch. Uh, that little scene, her in town, and things are starting to break down, but they haven't completely broke down yet. Before she gets to back to the house and whatnot, I thought that was a cool scene to add. Now, I guess since it popped in my head, I might as well talk about it now. One of the things they did change from the game over to the TV show was the spores. The I guess you could say the air version of it, the aerosol version of it, or however you want to name it. That they had to wear masks in certain areas in the game because the spores would infect you and whatnot. We don't have that because of uh, 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 the way the virus mutates in this show. So it's different, but it's so good. And I'm saying that because there's a scene in here where all of the infected are laying on the ground when they're trying to smuggle Ellie into the city or whatever, or out of the city, and they're laying on the ground, and once the sun kind of creeps over the buildings, the horizon and whatnot, and it hits the infected who are all laying down, and they all react. It's like they're a hive mind, and I thought that was a cool little touch, just a little tweak to the lore. Like I said, this show was pretty much spot on, beat by beat, of the source material, but the changes they made weren't bad, and the changes that they made actually make sense as far as the transition from media, because some things don't work if you translate it over to a different medium. You know what I'm saying? So the spores, I don't think that could have worked in live action. When I think about it, I'm like, that wouldn't work. It wouldn't actually it wouldn't make sense, because in the game it's only in certain areas and it's not in other areas, and you have to explain why the spores are just in this area and haven't floated over here and whatnot. So it makes sense. I understand why they did it, and I thought that was cool. The impact of the sacrifice of Tess that happens here, even though it happens the same way in the game, it still hit harder on TV. It hit so much harder. And I was like, man, like I said, I did not expect this show to really gut punch me the way it did. And it only gets worse. It only gets worse as this show goes along. But I thought this was an excellent introduction into this series for new viewers who didn't know about the property, who never played the game. I think this was a good introduction into the show. And for those of us who love the game, this was a love letter to us to let us know that we are taking care of this. We understand that you love this game. You are a fan of the property, and we're not going to diminish that. And I was reassured, and we were off and running from there. We move on to episode 2, entitled Infected. This time, this episode was directed by Neil Druckmann, and it was written by Craig Mazin, oddly enough. But this was kind of another origin story, something that was added to this show, added to the lore, at least the first part of it. And we get a flashback to 2 days before the outbreak happened in Indonesia, and we see this is where allegedly, I still haven't really pinpoint if this is what they were trying to say. Either way, I don't care, but it was just cool that they made they made it seem like this is the ground zero of where the virus originated from. So I thought that was cool, and that's where we found out there's no cure, there's no vaccine, there's nothing you could do. Authorities had bombed an entire city to try to prevent the outbreak, but we find out, we all know that didn't work. That's why I say that I'm not 100% sure that's the ground zero of the virus, because they wiped that city out. I mean, they flattened it, and it still ended up getting out. So we move on in that episode and pick up with Ellie and Joel and Tess. Because Tess, the sacrifice happened in this episode, not in episode 1. That's when they start the journey in episode 1. But this is where we find out that Ellie was bitten a while back and she didn't change. She's immune. You know, she's unaffected by the virus. So that's what makes her special. And that's why Joel and Tess has been tasked with getting her to the Fireflies so they can try to harvest a cure for this virus. So yes, this is where we find that out, and this is where we get the sacrifice, because Ellie was bitten while she was trying to protect Ellie. And like I said, it was it was a gut punch. It truly was a gut punch. And man, these scenes with Pedro Pascal, man, Pedro, this is why I'm so excited to see him as Reed Richards in Fantastic Four. Another time when they announced him in the cast of Fantastic Four, I was like, really? Pedro? I like Pedro, you know, but it's Reed Richards. But I think back over roles like this, roles like in the Mandalorian and stuff like that. Oh, he can do it. He's gonna kill it. He's gonna kill it. And the trailer for Fantastic Four, to see him as Reed Richards, even without seeing him stretch yet, I'm still invested. I'm like, man, he did it. He got it. I'm good. There's no need to worry. We're good. But his scenes with Tess and throughout this season with Ellie is, I mean, something to inspire by. If you're a up and coming actor or actress, watch Pedro Pascal. Watch how he acts. Watch how he emotes. You know, because Joel in this show doesn't really talk a lot. There's not a lot of dialogue for Joel in this show, and you know, I'm saying he's not a mute, but it's not a lot of dialogue. You know what I'm saying? And he has to emote a lot, and the dude just does an amazing job as Joel. Amazing job. But speaking of amazing, let's move on to episode 3, the episode that got the world in an uproar. And either you absolutely loved this episode or you absolutely hated it. And the people who hated it are just bigot, just, I don't know, I was about to say racist. You ain't racist, you're just a moron. You know, this was one of the greatest love stories I've ever seen. I don't care what side of the fence you lie on. I don't care if you're just downright against the LGBTQ plus community or not. This was a beautiful, absolutely beautiful love story. Episode 3, Long Time, directed by Peter Hoy. And this is the episode that we get Bill and Frank. And in the game, we don't get this. Now, this is a complete from top to bottom, a complete addition to the show. This was not in the game. If you play the game, it's insinuated, but it's not. You don't see Frank. you read letters that Frank left about Bill, you know, you know, and it's not flattering, you know, but you could tell that they had some kind of relationship, whether it's a friend, love, hate, you know, partnership of some kind that just fell apart. And I mean, ended tragically, to the degree that Frank rather die than be around Bill and his paranoia and, you know, whatever, you know, and it's tragic. And the way Bill reacted to that, you know, finding out that Frank, he rather had died than to be with him. He rather had turned into an infected than be with him. Uh, as a partner, like I said, they never locked down that they were actually a couple. But the way Bill reacted when he found out that Frank left or died, I think Frank killed himself in the game. If I'm not mistaken, they discovered his body. He had hung himself, or something to that degree, and it was it was heartbreaking to a degree, you know, because Bill was this hardened character up to that point, and his reaction to discovering Frank was heartbreaking. And so when we get to the show and we get this entire episode dedicated to their relationship, whether it's in the game or not. Now, Neil Druckmann did say in an interview that this is what he wanted to do in the game. I guess that's why it was kind of quote unquote insinuated in the game, but he wasn't allowed to do it, you know, because people are sensitive about that. I don't know why. I just, well, let me shut up. But anyways, uh, yeah. So he finally got the opportunity to play it out in this format, and thank God that he did. Beautiful, beautiful story. We pick up with Joel and Ellie. They're heading to see Bill and Frank to help them on their journey. Joel having met Bill and Frank before in the past with Tess, so they have somewhat of a relationship. They know each other, so they know that Bill and Frank have some supplies that they can get to help them on their journey. Anywho, there's a flashback to 2007 where Frank is he he gets trapped or gets caught in one of Bill's traps around his little compound that he created, you know, because he's a survivalist. He's a paranoid survivalist, and he's portrayed by oh my God, why is his name escaping me? He's known for comedy with the beard. I can't. Oh my God, he was on Parks and Rec. Anyway, it's gonna come to me eventually, but he's playing Bill, and you know, Frank is he's like, look, just take me in. I'm trying to get to Baltimore or something like that. But Bill was of course kind of reluctant because he's a survivalist, he's on his own and whatnot. But he eventually does. And as time goes on, they're living together. They started sharing a love for music and food together because Bill can cook. He's a really good cook, and he has a certain taste of music that Frank enjoys as well. And it's funny because throughout that episode, while I was watching it, I was just waiting for the ball to drop, where Frank was going to stab, figuratively, stab Bill in the back, and you know, leave him bare, take all his food and supplies and whatnot, and go leave Bill just a broken man. We didn't get it. And I think that's why it hit extra harder, at least for me, because I was looking at it from that spectrum instead of just watching it for what it was. And man, it was so beautiful. It was a earned love. It was a earned relationship. Uh, Years they go on, developing this relationship, and you see how they've able they were able to make just a beautiful utopia in this little compound that they built away from the world. As the world crumbles around them, they were in complete heaven. They were in bliss, you know. until we find out that Frank had cancer. He was terminally ill. As we get to the towards the end of the episode, and Bill can't live without him. He's saying he can't live without him. Frank wants to kill himself because he doesn't want to uh, end up dying, I guess, and coming back to kill him or whatever the case, or becoming infected or however it works. So they did an assisted suicide, a double suicide, and they married. They got married to each other, uh, which was cute. It wasn't quote unquote legal, but they did it symbolically, and it was a very special episode. And what made it so beautiful, the way they filmed it, the way they shot this episode, we didn't see them kill themselves. We didn't even see their bodies. It was Joel discovering when they finally got to the house. Joel discovered them in the bed together with a note, uh, uh, you know, explaining why they did what they did, and we still didn't see it. He just went in the room and he came back out the room with the note, and it was something special, man. It was heartbreaking yet beautiful at the same time. One of the best episodes of that season. I can't express anymore how great of an episode that was. We move on to episode 4. Episode 4, which is entitled "Please Hold My Hand," is directed by Jeremy Webb. And once again, this episode, it kind of stretches what we already seen in the game. The next two episodes, to be honest with you, the next two episodes is a section of the game that, once again, powerful. It was powerful in the game. I teared up while playing the game at this section of it, while I was playing of it. And you can just imagine how I reacted when they did when they pulled it off here on the show. We get to Missouri, and Joel and Ellie, they're forced to detour through Kansas City, where they are ambushed. And Joel, he kills two men. The third one overpowers him, and they nearly choke him to death. But Ellie saves him by shooting the man with the pistol that she found at Frank's house. And so Joel don't want her with a weapon. He don't want her to grow up, to be like him, essentially. And so we find the bandits. Well, more bandits find those bodies that they laid out. And the leader of this little clan or whatever, Kathleen, who was created for the show, I believe. She's not in the game. I don't recall that character in the game. And it's cool, though, because it was a good creation, because that character added layers to this little section of the show, of the season, that I wasn't expecting, and it made it more exciting. It wasn't just Joel and Ellie running from infected. It's more to it. I like what they did here. Kathleen is looking for this guy named Henry, because Henry was once with them, and I forgot what he did, but he did something to kind of double cross him or whatever, and so on and so forth. And she believes that Ellie and Joel are with Henry, so she's hunting them to get to Henry. But of course, we know Ellie and Joel don't know Henry. They don't know what's going on here. They're just trying to get where they're getting. Needless to say, they do end up linking up with Henry. Henry helps him out, and they go to his hideout, where we meet Henry's brother, and who's deaf, and his name is Sam. And man, this sets up the next episode, which is I don't know how I'm gonna get through this. I'm gonna speed through episode 5. So we get to episode 5 at this point, which is entitled "Endure and Survive." Once again, this episode is directed by Jeremy Webb. Oh boy, this was this was a Henry and Sam, they're brothers. Henry is trying to take care of Sam the best he can. Um, Henry wants to go with Joel, take his brother, get out of the city so where they can be safe. And Joel is not having it. Joel don't even want Ellie with him. So he doesn't want any more baggage with him. And so to add insult to injury, Sam, he also has leukemia, if I'm not mistaken, in this show. Don't think he had it in the game. I need to go back and play the first Last of Us game, but memory serves, I don't think he had leukemia. That's something they added for the show. If I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure everybody's going to tell me I'm wrong, but I'm just I don't recall it. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Uh, Eventually, Joel does agree. He agrees that they can all leave together. Well, we get to a part of this episode where they trying to escape the city. They get to a part, and this is a part of the game. One of my favorite parts of the video game. This little section where they encounter a horde of infected in this little portion of the town, like in this cul-de-sac, if you will. And you have the bandits and the infected. It's just I mean, my God, lion's den, if you will. And Kathleen ended up being killed. she gets demolished. The bandits get demolished. They're fighting their way out of it. They being Sam, Henry, Joel, and Ellie, and they get away. And so they managed to get to this hideout to whereas they can recover. I think it was in a motel until morning where they were going to venture back off and continue on their journey. Sam shows Ellie that during the little skirmish with the infected and everything, Sam was bitten on the leg by one of the infected. And so Ellie trying her hardest, bro, because she's immune. So she cuts herself and she takes her blood and kind of smears it on it, thinking that's how it works, because you got to remember they're kids and they've grown a cool little relationship. How, because they're the only kids around this time, even though they're not the exact same age, but they can relate more than the adults. So she's trying to help them, and my God, bro, the frantic nature of her trying to help and praying that it works. We're just gonna sleep, and Sam knowing that it's not gonna work. He knows it, and the look on this little kid's face, the actor who plays Sam, ooh boy, well, I'm getting chills. I'm telling you, this was a tough one. He knew it wasn't gonna work. So the next morning, Ellie wakes up, and when she wakes up, she looks, and Sam is just sitting on the edge of the bed, looking out the window, and she's calling out to him, but of course he's deaf, so he can't hear. And she walks around and she sees that he has indeed turned. He's infected, and he attacks Ellie. And if you think that's heartbreaking, if you think that's where it ends, no. They fall out into the other room where Joel and Henry are, and she's trying to fight off Sam, who's trying to bite her, and Joel is about to go over there and kill him. But Henry points the gun at Joel, like, don't touch my brother. Don't touch my brother. And he's like, man, he's going to kill her. You know what I'm saying? It's like a Sophie's choice, the worst Sophie's choice you could ever have. And without thinking too much on it, Henry turns the gun on Sam and pulls the trigger and kills his brother to save Ellie. And it was just a dead silence, man. It was, whoo. And all you can hear Henry say, what did I do? What did I do? And he points the gun at Ellie. He points the gun at Sam because he's so mad. He wants to take out revenge on who did this to his brother. But he knows it's not them. But it's like, what do I do at this point? And he puts the gun to his head. And as he puts the gun to his head, Joel and Ellie is like, no, no, no. And he pulls the trigger and kills himself. And it's like, oh my God. What is this show doing to me? And I'm telling you, the game was just that effective. But it hit harder on this show. So Joel and Ellie, they bury Sam and Henry, and they continue on with their journey. Hard episode, bro. Hard episode. We move on to episode 6, entitled Ken. This episode is directed by Jasmila Zambazek. Pretty sure I butchered it. I apologize, but this is when Joel and Ellie, they reach this community in Wyoming that so happens to have his brother Tommy. We saw Tommy in the first episode, and Tommy welcomes him. You know, there is the reunion that they've been waiting on for years. They haven't seen each other for years. Tommy's wife is pregnant, and this is all from the game. All this is from the game. There's subtle little changes, but I didn't care. It was little stupid stuff that didn't hurt the show, didn't help the show. It was just there. But all of this is from the game. Joel wanted to leave Ellie with them, so he can go off and be on his own. He this is not a cross he wants to bear, and it was just a lot there. But he ends up bringing Ellie to where the Fireflies used to be, in this base, this vacated base, and I think in Utah, and they run into a group of, I don't know, bandits, raiders, whatever you want to call them, and Joel gets injured. But Joel does kill most of them. Ellie kills one that was that was about to kill him, and they're riding off on a horse, and Joel collapses and near death. And so she's unsure at this point if Joel will survive, and so on and so forth. And so that's where we leave off on that episode. That leaves us to episode 7, entitled Left Behind. This episode was directed by Liz Johnson. And this episode is not in the Last of Us video game proper. It's a separate game. This is a separate addition to the game Left Behind, and it's the backstory of Ellie. And so we get it here in episode 7 as a flashback episode. And so the episode is Ellie. She takes Joel to this shelter, this abandoned house, dealing with the injuries he sustained last episode. He's close to death, and he urges Ellie to leave him. He's like, just go. And so that leads us to the flashback that Ellie remembers when she was in this military school, and she's there with her best friend Riley, and Ellie, she causes trouble. She gets into fights with other students there and whatnot. Riley, she runs away, and she says she's been missing for weeks. And a lot of the students and the instructors there are, trying to get information out of Ellie, but Ellie doesn't know. And so Riley ends up sneaking back into the dorm room and tells Ellie that she joined the Fireflies. And she brings Ellie to this abandoned mall where they can have a girls' night, I guess, their final night out, because Riley is about to go to Atlanta, where she's assigned to, with the Fireflies. So this was going to be her last night in Boston, where they currently were. And so Ellie is upset by this, and she convinces Riley to stay, and they kiss. And so they're in the mall, and they end up getting attacked by infected. And Ellie kills the infected, but both of them got bitten in the struggle. So they both decide to stay together and wait until the infection takes hold. And so we all know at this point that Ellie is immune. This was her first. This is where she got that bite on her arm. And so we never see what happens to Riley, but we can only assume that Riley end up turning, and Ellie had to kill her. And so we flash back to the present where Ellie finds this sewing machine and she starts to stitch up Joel's wounds that he sustained from the last episode. Uh, Not sewing machine, but needles and stuff. Sewing machine, that would have been kind of that would have been awkward to try to get to get that to work on him. But anyways, she sews up his wounds, and that's how the episode ends. So we get to episode 8, when we are in need. This episode was directed by Ali Abbasi, and we pick up where Ellie leaves Joel in this abandoned house to go search for food, hunt for food as he recovers. And so she shoots a deer and she tracks the wounded animal. And while she's tracking the animal, she encounters David, this preacher, quotation marks there, this preacher, and his little hunting party that he has. So she trades her deer for penicillin for Joel, of course. And so that was the agreement. David reveals the man who stabbed Joel is the member of his group. And so there's there's an issue there. So Ellie leaves to treat Joel, so he can get better with the penicillin. So the next day, she discovers David and the men have followed her to seek revenge on Joel, and so she flees and to try to draw their attention away from where Joel is, because once again, Joel is still recovering, and so she ends up getting captured. And so at Camp David, or not the Camp David, but at David's camp, he reveals that he has been feeding his group human flesh. Yeah, I mean, desperate times, desperate measures, I guess. So he's been feeding them human flesh. Meanwhile, Joel, he recovers. He awakens and tortures some of David's men into telling him where Ellie is. And so, meanwhile, we have David trying to hunt down Ellie, so he's trying to rape her. This dude is a vile human being. He's trying to rape and kill her, but Ellie ends up getting the upper hand and kills him with a meat cleaver. And Joel, he finds, he manages to find out where Ellie is, and just as Ellie is running out of the little compound, she runs into Joel, and she's traumatized. And this, as this community is burning down from all the events that took place, trying to capture her, and he comforts her and lets her know that he's here, that he's going to protect her and whatnot. Very good episode. Nice way to end that episode right before we get into the season finale, episode 9, entitled Look for the Light. This episode is once again directed by Ali Abbasi, and this starts off with a flashback. And in this flashback, we see Ellie's mother. Once again, this is an addition to the show, not in the game, but an awesome addition to the show. Ellie's mother is named Anna, and she's bitten by an infected as she was giving birth to Ellie, which is contributing to her immunity, from her being immune to this virus. And I'm talking about Ellie here, oddly enough. So to make, a little point here, the actress who's playing Ellie's mother is the actress who provided the voice for Ellie in the game. So that was a cool little touch there, a little nod, a little thank you to the fans. I like that. That was really, really cool. I can't think of the actress name right now, but she was the little girl on growing pains, I think it was. so so there's a you'll know her when you see her. But anyway, back to the flashback, she being Anna, she finds Marlene, who we were introduced to in at least earlier in the season, um, who hesitates to take Ellie, but she does take her, but she does kill Anna uh, at her request. Requested that she kill her because she knew that she was going to turn. And so she obliged. So we fast forward to present day when Joel tells Ellie that his suicide attempt after the death of his daughter Sarah, and uh, that was kind of soul crushing too. That was a nice scene that happened there. The Fireflies, they capture Ellie and knock Joel unconscious. And then Joel wakes up in the hospital. Marlene explains that doctors are preparing Ellie for surgery in hopes to discover this cure or develop this cure. And Joel protests when he realized that this procedure that they're going to do on Ellie is going to kill her. There's no other way around it. They have to harvest everything from her. And so this this was not sitting right with Joel. And so Marlene orders Joel to be taken away, before he ruins everything. But he manages to escape. He kills several Firefly soldiers, including the ones who surrendered willingly. He he gave no quarter, man. He killed everybody, including Ellie's surgeon for resisting, and that's going to come back in season 2. Just keep that in mind in case you don't know the lore of The Last of Us. That is a big, big part of season 2. Joel killed the surgeon. And so Joel carries an unconscious Ellie from the hospital. Marlene intercepts them and tells Joel that there's still time for a cure. We can still do this, man. I mean, don't. I know you've killed everybody in this hospital. I get it. I don't care. We have to stop this. She is our last hope. Joel's response: shoot and kill her. And that's what he did. He shot and killed her. Ellie awakes. Joel flat out lies and tells her that the Fireflies had already failed to develop a cure from other immune people and whatnot. He just laid it on. And you could tell, great job by Bella Ramsey with her acting in that scene. She knew it was a lie, but she wanted to believe it was true. So she didn't say anything. So as they hike back to Jackson, Wyoming, where Tommy is, Ellie, she couldn't take it no more. She had to ask, and she asked Joel, "Is that true? Is the story true? Did the Fireflies fail, and were there other immune people?" And so Joel, in epic fashion, he stares, thinks about it, and say, "Yeah, it's true." You know, he's gonna die with the lie. And Ellie, once again, great acting. She knew it was a lie. She knew it was a lie, and at this point, it was like whatever, I guess, And she just stared back at him and said, "Okay," and it went off. And that's how season 1 concluded for The Last of Us, and that's how it concluded in the video game, the exact same way. This show was so good. It was so faithful to the source materials and managed to add on so much more, but it was so seamless that you had no choice but to accept it and take it for what it was. And it did a great job of adding to the story. Nothing spoiled what we already had. All it did was add on to the greatness that we already had, because doing a shot by shot remake, it would have got boring real quick. So adding these little nuggets with a backstory here, or an expounding on the relationship with Bill and Frank, or a little backstory of Ellie and her mother giving birth, and all this here, giving us the left behind little section of the game, throwing that into the middle of the season. It just added so much more. I don't know how season 2 is going to go. Um, a lot has been said. A lot of people did not care for the part 2 of The Last of Us, the video game, I should say. And for the most part, I can somewhat see it. I can't fairly say that because I didn't finish the game yet, but for the I would say 60% that I of the game that I did finish, I can see where people would say it's not as good because it's not up to this point. It's really draggy. It's really boring. There's a lot of uh 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 cinematic elements to it. It's not a lot of gameplay to part 2. It probably will come later on, but not so much like it was in the first game. And so I don't know how they're going to sauce it up for the TV show. From what I understand, they're doing 2 more seasons. They're going to do this season, season 2 and season 3, and wrap it up. That's what they said initially. I don't know how they're going to stretch out 2 seasons from part 2 because that's it. It's only 2 games. So I don't know how they would stretch out season 2, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm confident as long as all parties involved in season 1 are still involved in season 2, I'm on board. But like I said, I do know how the game goes, and I do know the outcome for a lot of these characters and whatnot. This is going to be tough. this is going to be a hard pill to swallow this season if they stick to the game like they did for season 1. And so we'll see. We'll see how it go. But I am super excited for season 2, which drops on HBO and Max on April the 13th. I would love to know, are you excited for season 2? And what did you think of season 1 of The Last of Us? I thought it was one of the best seasons of television ever. Ever. This was almost a perfect show. It was, I mean, it was great. But I say almost perfect because it hit home with me harder because I'm a big fan of the game. And a lot of people who are fans of the game appreciated it more. I don't know how those outside of that little circle or that little bubble responded. I haven't talked to anybody that disliked it. My wife, she watched it with me. She didn't play the game, but she enjoyed the show. And so I would love to know, for those of you who haven't played the game, what did you think of the television show? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Could you care less about season 2? I would love to know. Or even more questions for you. Did you think there was enough of infected in the show? I did hear that complaint. There wasn't a lot of infected in the show. And I can see that. I understand that, but this was more of a drama. The infected were used pretty, I would say, pretty proper. They weren't too much and they weren't too little. That's my humble opinion. But want to know yours. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about YouTube, everybody. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel on YouTube and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this recap of The Last of Us season 1, which is currently on Max if you want to go back and watch it in preparation for season 2. Want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.